This is Tampa Bay's 10 Talk.
It's time for FLA Law, brought to you by the personal injury attorneys of Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes. This hour will be informative, along with taking your questions and comments. Now, here are your hosts for today's show.
Good evening. It is Tuesday, and that means that we're here for another edition of FLA Law on the radio. This is an hour sponsored by the law firm of Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes. We are the oldest personal injury law firm in Tampa Bay. We have been helping people for 70 years. Yes, it is our 70th birthday this year. We started back in 1955 with Guy Perenich and Bob Carroll, and we've continued that tradition now for 70 years. We are proud to be a voice of the injured in Tampa Bay. And as a thank you and giving back to the community, that's why we do FLA Law on the radio, to provide answers that you may have to your legal questions. So we are live today from 5 until 6. If you have questions, give us a call at 727-441-3000. We'll be happy to tackle your questions. Again, I'm Matthew Noyes. I'm a personal injury attorney that also does workers' compensation and Social Security disability. But I'm not here alone. I have my good friend and a very smart attorney, John Tucker, here to also answer your questions that you may have regarding his specialty of law. John, thank you for coming, taking an hour of your time to visit with our listeners and share your expertise in your area of law.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Sure. Why don't you give a little background about yourself to our listeners? I understand you're a Gators guy.
I am a double Gator. Got my undergrad and law degrees at the University of Florida after I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, and made the decision to move to Florida one snowy winter day, as many people have, right?
That's right. So you must be feeling pretty good about March Madness this year,
it's
right?
It's going pretty well, you know, made it to the Sweet 16. So
I must admit, I do have them as winning it all, so I don't want to curse it, but it's on my bracket.
Don't jinx it. Don't jinx it.
I know. And I was going to say Louisville, but I wasn't sure if it's Louisville or Louisville.
Louisville is how we say it from there.
Yeah. All right. So tell me, you came down and tell us a little bit about you and why you became the type of attorney that you are.
Well, thanks. I moved to this area, the Tampa Bay area, in 1991 after getting out of law school. And, I had started college. Like a lot of lawyers, I wanted to be a doctor. And physics and calculus kind of did me in. So I was never going to be a doctor. But
I know that.
My teachers all the way through had said, you really should be a lawyer. And I got into law school, did well in law school, and got out in practice. Didn't really know what type of lawyer I wanted to be. And as it happens, the first case that ever got referred to me about 6 months out of law school was a disability insurance case. Oh. And I got to get into that in an area, ERISA, which is the Federal Employee Benefits Law.
Something I stay far away from.
So when people have, the benefits through work, that's the law that covers it.
Right.
Well, a lot of people have disability insurance through work. So I got the chance to start working with disability cases as a brand new baby lawyer. And then I got on with a Social Security disability firm. Of course, you're very familiar with that area, right? Yeah. And got a chance to do thousands of hearings in that area. And over the years, built up my practice doing disability insurance and really focused on that over time. We did pro bono work for veterans in the early days, but back then a lawyer couldn't get paid to represent veterans at any level in the process, the administrative process before the VA. So it wasn't something we did all the time because we have to make a living, right?
Right.
But all the while doing these disability cases, I really got the chance to be involved with medicine, talk to doctors, interact with doctors, learn more about medicine. So those things that I thought I wanted to do when I started college, they came back to me.
I feel like you're still doing that a little bit.
I know.
Without having to see the blood. That's what I always say.
Sure know a lot of the gross and gory stuff, though.
Yeah.
In fact, that's one of the sayings we've got around the office. When we can make the adjuster or the rater get sick, vomit, we probably win. But, I had the chance over what's now 34 years to really learn a lot about the human body, learn about how it can affect people. And, as you know from what you do, life can change on a dime, right?
Right.
I mean, people can become disabled in an instant. So having the chance to represent people who've had these big changes in their life because of an injury or an illness, I think it's really changed me. It's made me a better person. And I've learned a lot about myself and been able to help a lot of people along the way.
And you spend a lot of your efforts and a lot of your time helping probably one of the most important pieces or subset of our society, and that's the veterans.
Yes.
And tell us a little bit about that.
So several years ago, Congress changed the law and allowed a veteran to hire an attorney after they got a decision in a veteran's disability claim. So they could hire a lawyer and pay a fee, typically a contingency fee, like what's charged in an injury case or a Social Security disability case. So we started doing that work. And today it's the largest part of our practice. It's grown by leaps and bounds. There are so many veterans that need help. Unfortunately, I always say, everybody wants the veterans to get the benefits they deserve, except the VA. Yes, I mean, the VA sits on these cases forever. Right. One of the first guys I ever represented took 12 years to get him to the end of the line and, get the claim finally paid. And it's funny because, we're like that hedgehog. We're not going to stop. We keep going. Right. In fact, our tagline at Tucker Disability is we never give up. And
that's good.
The challenge with the veterans is a lot of them want to give up. They're like, look, I've had enough. I don't want to do this anymore. The VA is just wearing me down. And a lot of what we have to do is tell them, you don't want to give up. You keep fighting.
They want you to give up.
They want you to give up. Yeah. In fact, all of these disability systems, they're designed to be complex. They're designed to be kind of vague. They give you a form that has a half-inch box to explain your whole disability. Yeah. They're not asking you the right questions. They want you to quit.
That's right. They want you to get so frustrated you say, forget it. I'm not doing it.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I see. I knew John wasn't going to promote himself, so I did do a little bit of research, and so. This evening, we do have John Tucker. He's a VA disability and ERISA disability attorney. But he's a smart guy. He is an adjunct professor, or he has been an adjunct professor at Stetson Law School, where I went. So It's a very good school. You taught ERISA law, ERISA litigation.
I did.
That's great.
Yeah.
You're part of the National Organization of Veterans Advocate, the board of directors.
Yes.
Very good. Mm-hmm. And you also are on the Military Affairs Committee of the Florida Bar.
Correct.
I didn't even know there was a committee, so that's very good. Mm-hmm. Now that they have that, not only is smart, he's also a good guy. He has served as a board of directors for the St. Pete Free Clinic for 6 years. Mm-hmm. Has served on the board for the Mid-Florida chapter of Multiple Sclerosis Society. The Girls Inc., formerly Girls Club. Mm-hmm. So listeners, you have a great opportunity to get answers from a smart guy and a good guy, John Tucker here. So we are here to answer your questions that you have. There are several ways you can get to us. We are live on the air right now on Tuesday from 5 to 6. If you're listening to this on our podcast, then you may not be able to call in right now, but if you are listening to us live, you can call in us at 727-441-3000. We also on Facebook Live on the firm's Facebook page at Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes Injury Lawyers. We are live here. You can see John and myself here in the studio. And you can type, if you don't want to have your voice heard on the radio, you can just type in your question right here on Facebook. And we'll be happy to answer any questions that you have right on Facebook. And so type us in that way too. We are also live on YouTube right now. And so you can see us there as well. But if you have a question, call us or type us a question right on Facebook Live. We are here for you as a service to you. So take advantage of that opportunity to get the questions that you have answered. So let's just jump right in, John, if that's all right. You represent veterans in the VA service-connected disabilities claims. Mm-hmm. What are the biggest challenges that the vets face as they fight their appeals?
Well, delay. I mentioned that before. I think that's one of the things that it's changed over time. The delays aren't as bad as they used to be, but veterans can still wait months and years to get paid. A lot of vets don't understand that they can see their own doctors.
Okay.
And they think, well, the VA is going to send me to a doctor to check me out. But as you know from the different systems you deal with, when you depend on the decision maker to send you to their doctor, he may have it in the bag for you.
Something smells a little funny when that happens,
right.
That's for sure.
So they don't realize they can go to their own doctor. And some of them don't even realize they need to be treating. They need to actively go to a doctor and tell the doctor what's going on so that the medical notes actually show they have a problem, but they don't realize it. And then they end up with no evidence.
That's hard. That's what we see all the time. You probably saw that in your Social Security disability business too, but also in our auto cases.
Right.
People are hurt, but if you don't have the medical documentation, you have very weak legs to stand on.
Right.
And medical documentation is the key to any claim when you're supporting a claim, when you're fighting an insurance company or the government. You need to have all the evidence that you need, and so that is so important to have.
Yeah. Well, it's tiresome. We've all been to a doctor, and you sit there for 45 minutes after your appointment time. You're not getting in. They want to rush you through. It's very frustrating.
Right.
And
you don't feel much better afterwards either.
That's right.
And I hear that a lot in my auto cases. It's like I feel good, but then I back to normal again.
Right.
I'm back to where I was before the appointment.
Well, in an injury case, when you've got a permanent injury, it's permanent for a reason. It's chronically going to stick with you. And of course, our disabled clients, they're dealing with problems that aren't going away.
Right.
They may get better one day, a little worse the next, but they're never getting all the way better.
No,
and dealing with that for the rest of your life is a challenge. In fact, I think that's one of the biggest things that people have to deal with when they have a disability claim is that acceptance that maybe they're not going to work again. What they studied for all those years, what they, did to advance in their profession all those years, they have to come to grips. They have to accept they're not going to be able to do it anymore.
Right.
And being disabled, there's this popular myth that there's the people sitting around collecting a check all the time. It's not really the case. Of course, you got to continue to prove you're disabled, but it's incredibly boring.
Right.
Most disabled people are so limited they can't do things. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't frauds out there. There's always going to be people like that in any area, right?
That's true.
But for most people, they're sitting at home like, I can't even go to the mall or go to Publix because it's a bad day. I cannot get out of my house. And I think that's really hard for people to accept.
And a lot of people that have the ERISA disability plan, I would assume, the ERISA disabilities through their work.
Right.
A lot of them are high-level employees or employment, like nurses and doctors and such like that. I can't imagine not being able to be a lawyer anymore.
Right.
It's what I do every day for 34, almost 40 years now.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I can't imagine all of a sudden, poof, some condition prevents me from doing that.
Right.
That would be very frustrating. And so I can see how an applicant would be like, gosh, I don't want this to be the case. And I think your role as their advocate is to try to explain to them, you may not want it, but it may be your only alternative.
Well, and it's there for you. There's the stages of grief you're going to go through. Just like if somebody passes away, it's very similar when you lose your livelihood. But when you get into a system that you have paid for, like Social Security, like being a veteran, you paid with your service.
Sure.
It is your right to pursue that benefit. And that's actually another thing that we see very frequently. I have a client named Douglas that I talked to recently, and he took a very long time to apply for benefits, years. And he said, look, there were other guys who were hurt worse. They had more obvious problems than I did. And I kind of pushed everything down. He had physical problems. He had a mental health issue, but he said, there's guys that died, and I just don't think I should get this. Other people should get this before me. And he ultimately got into some counseling. And the counselor, fortunately, was able to explain to him, hey, you need to apply for the benefits. You served. That was part of the contract Uncle Sam made with you, right, that if something happened to you. And ultimately, it took us a while, but we got him 100%. And he totally changed his life. He said to me, you guys, you turned my life around. He said, I was on the verge of taking my own life, and I was losing my family. And this got us to a place where, we've got income coming in now. And finally, somebody has acknowledged that I actually have this condition and I've got these physical problems too. And it all happened because I was in the military and I saw things and I experienced things and things happened to me. And that's why we do what we do.
Yeah. I mean, people end up having a new normal, after disability or after the service. And part of our job as the advocate is to try to have them accept their new normalcy with any ways that we can. And if it's benefits, that's a wonderful way to do it. Excuse me. Well, why don't you talk about the process? I know we just jumped right into what's the biggest challenges, but what is the process? What if a veteran feels that they may be entitled to benefits? What process do they need to go through?
So the government has made it a lot easier than it used to be. It used to be fairly complex with forms that had to be mailed in. Now they can go to va.gov and file an application for benefits. Sometimes finding where the government has put the apply for disability link is a little hard, but they file an application there. They don't have to put a great deal of information to start an application. And the government typically is going to send them to something called a compensation and pension examination. They're going to send them to one of the VA doctors.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that a veteran can't submit medical records, can't submit opinions and other things from their own doctors, though. Most vets don't do that. They wait for that C&P, the compensation and pension exam. And one of the challenges when you're doing VA work, it's all acronyms. Of course, the guys come out of the military, men and women come out of the military. They know all kinds of acronyms. They get to learn a whole new set of acronyms at the VA. This application process can take a matter of months to over a year. And once they get a decision, it's called a rating decision, the VA says, okay, we've accepted this condition as service connected or not accepted it. And if they accept it, they assign a rating percentage. So unlike Social Security disability, where you have to be completely disabled,
right?
In the VA system, you can have disabilities that are rated with a percentage that you're still working, you're not totally disabled. And in fact, every different claim that a veteran has, every condition a veteran has is a claim. So they may have a left elbow injury, a right knee, and PTSD. That's 3 claims.
Oh, okay.
And so each of those are rated separately. And then the VA has a system for combining those. That's another challenging thing for veterans is understanding the combining because it's not addition.
It's not 3 + 3 + 3 equals 9. Somehow it equals 5.
It's an odd method of doing it, but it's the rules. It's how they've set it up. We actually have a video on our YouTube channel called VA Math because VA Math doesn't make any sense, but once you understand how it works, you kind of can put it together. So veterans can file an appeal at that point if they get a decision that's either a denial, VA says not service connected, or they assign a percentage that isn't the right percentage, or they assign the wrong effective date. An interesting thing that's probably important for your listeners to understand is that the veteran can't get retroactive benefits any earlier than the day they file an application.
Oh, I was going to ask you that. Okay.
So they have to apply, and then that's the date that should get locked in for when they get paid. So we'll have Vietnam veterans come to us who say, I've had this since the 70s. Say, well, I'm sorry, you applied for it in 2024. You can't get it any earlier than that. So apply as soon as you can. And in fact, the military now has a system where they can apply while they're still in the military before discharge.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
All right. That's a better system.
But a lot of older vets, they didn't have that. That's a fairly new thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so they can file the appeal. And what happens during that?
Well, they've got the chance to file different types of appeals. So under something called the Appeals Modernization Act in 2019, the AMA, VA created 2 types of appeals at the regional office level where the initial claims are decided. And then they created multiple types of appeals at the Board of Veterans Appeals, which is, for instance, here in St. Petersburg, we've got the VA regional office over there at Bay Pines. Well, that covers the entire state of Florida. A veteran, if they didn't like a decision, could file an appeal called a supplemental claim and send in some new evidence.
Okay.
It has to be what they call new and relevant. So it's got to be something VA's never seen before, but it also has to go to the reason why VA denied the claim. And for a veteran to get service-connected disability, they have to prove that they had something happen to them in the service. They have a current condition that has symptoms that are great enough to be rated. And then there has to be something called a nexus. So those two things have to be connected.
Okay.
It's much like in an injury case, causation.
Right.
The concept of, yes, your injuries are related to the accident. Well, if a military service member has a car crash in the service, they have to prove the injuries from that crash were related to the crash. They occurred while they were in the service, or they're a downstream event. So the veteran can submit evidence to show that VA was wrong about something they decided. Perhaps VA said, well, you didn't have anything happen in the service. They said, well, yes, I did. Here, I have a picture of myself on crutches. So I obviously hurt myself. Maybe the VA has said, well, you don't have a nexus. Our doctor said what you have isn't connected. And that that happens very often with mental health conditions and diseases. And so getting an independent doctor to look at a file, to examine them, to say, oh, no, this is related. And here's why. That can be really valuable.
Right. Especially if you're talking about this long gap in treatment, like we just talked about.
Right.
They've dealt with it since the 70s, but now they're just applying now. So much could happen between the 70s and now that they could try to say the nexus is something totally different.
Right. And, one of the ways we help veterans is we're helping them develop this evidence. A lot of people say, oh, lawyers make up evidence. That's shady. It's not shady. It's actually what we do. We help people document the problems they have. So maybe that's a statement from somebody who knew the person. It could be a doctor's report. It could be photographs. I've actually found newspaper articles from a client who served in Germany. When he was in Germany, he was in the World League of American Football, I think they called it. This is 20 years ago, maybe. He hurt his knee, but the medical records from the hospital were lost, and he couldn't prove that he hurt his knee when he was in the service. We found some articles that were published in the sports section of the local newspaper in German talking about his knee injury and how he went on injured reserve because of it.
Wow.
That's something like that.
Well, I always say that our job is we're the puzzle makers.
Right.
We are hired to find the right pieces and to put the puzzle together the way it's supposed to be.
Right.
Because you can never tell what the full puzzle is if you're missing 2 or 3 or 4 pieces. You're not creating the pieces. You're just finding the pieces that are lost.
Exactly.
And I think that's so important. So listeners, I can go on forever, but let me reintroduce ourselves. I'm Matthew Noyes with the law firm of Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes. We are the proud sponsors of FLA Law on the Radio, which you're listening to right now. But I also have my friend John Tucker here, who's a VA disability attorney and also an ERISA law attorney. And we're here to answer questions that you have. So if you do have questions, give us a call at 727-441-3000 or check us out on Facebook Live at Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes Injury Lawyers. And we'll be able to answer your questions if you post them on our Facebook page as well. Now, John, when we first started doing Social Security disability, we used to say, come to us after you've been denied. After you filed your own application, you've been denied. We changed that many years ago because we felt that the application for the Social Security disability was important. How important is it when the vet's filing for disabilities, the application stage?
The application process is very important in terms of the evidence. And as I was saying earlier, a lot of vets don't think they can submit their own evidence. Because they can't hire and pay a lawyer, a lot of lawyers don't want to get involved in claims at that stage. In our firm, at Tucker Disability, we'll take pro bono cases at the application level. Obviously, we can't take every single person that calls us who wants us to do a free application, but we take a very large number, and we win a lot. The community has veteran service officers out there that can help vets. So the Disabled American Veterans, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the VFW, even each county in the state of Florida has an extension office that helps veterans. There's a State Department of Veterans Affairs where they'll help veterans process applications.
Oh, great.
And they'll do it for free. And some of them do an incredibly good job. even with help, the VA is commonly denying claims that should be paid for whatever reason. So there are an enormous number of claims that are filed, and an appeal is fairly common. They may grant something, but not everything they should have, as an example. But that application process is really important. And just filing the forms is never enough. There are a lot of folks who think, oh, you lawyers, you just fill out the forms. No, we don't just fill out the forms. But sometimes a couple of words on the form can make all the difference. So having somebody give you some guidance really can be valuable. And I would encourage anybody to contact a veteran service organization or call a lawyer and see if they'll handle your application pro bono.
But once they've been denied or have a rating that they don't agree with, that's when they need to jump in and call you or somebody that handles VA claims and appeals. Absolutely. They don't want to handle the appeal by themselves.
No, because obviously there's been a problem. There's some kind of snafu that happened. It's got to get fixed.
Right.
Yeah. And we handle the cases on a contingency fee. So we got skin in the game with them.
Right.
I tell my clients all the time, I don't get paid till you do. I have every reason in the world to get you paid.
That's right. We do that in our auto accidents too. Right. We have to do that,
That's
because we only fight the battles that need to be fought.
Mm-hmm.
That clients are being in an auto case are being ignored by the insurance company, and in a VA case are being ignored by the Veterans Administration. And what just gets to me is that these people risk their lives.
That's right.
For our country, and now they're still fighting for their benefits.
Right.
So I salute you for helping that great community of veterans.
Thank you. There's probably another point I should make. Anything that happens to somebody in the military can be covered as a VA disability claim. So they're in the military 24/7. Literally anything that happens to them while they're in, with some exceptions, will be covered. So what's not covered? If a person goes nearsighted in the military, that's a natural progression. That's not covered. If they have a personality disorder, that's not covered. But if they fall out of the top rack of the bunk beds and mess up their shoulder when they hit the floor, that's covered. They don't have to be in combat.
I was going to ask you that. Does it have to be combat related?
It does not. Now, that could get them some type of special protection in certain situations. It may have some things that are covered. PTSD is an example. The VA is more want to approve a PTSD claim for somebody that was in a combat zone. If they went to Southwest Asia, Afghanistan, Iraq, that's probably more likely to get covered than if they saw a bad car crash or they were on a ship where somebody, I've had several clients who've had friends caught on fire on board an aircraft carrier. But anything that happens to them while they're in, including diseases. So if somebody went sterile while they were in the military, that would be covered. If a woman had a hysterectomy, that's covered as a disability. Okay. So literally anything that happens to them while they're in, and a lot of veterans don't realize that they can file claims for anything like that.
And you touched on it, and it's how veterans disability is so different than Social Security disability, is that to be picked up on Social Security disability, you in essence have to be totally disabled.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, there's no temporary Social Security disability. Right. There's no partial Social Security disability. But that's different in the VA claims.
They get a rating for a given claim, and they're going to get paid based on those ratings. So VA basically assigns a 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, or 100% rating. At each level, you're paid a certain amount of money. Individuals are paid one amount. If they're married, they're paid a different amount. If they have dependents, they get paid more. And all the way up to 90%, they're effectively partially disabled.
Right.
There is something that's similar to Social Security, though. A veteran who hasn't yet received a 100%, they call it scheduler rating, can get something called total disability based on individual unemployability. Let's say the veteran has a 70% rating for their PTSD. If they can prove that their PTSD symptoms keep them from holding down a job that would allow them to make poverty wages, about $1,300 a month, it's equivalent to substantial gainful activity in Social Security. if they can prove that that condition that has the 70% rating keeps them from working, they can get paid as if they had a 100% rating.
Oh, okay.
So veterans who find themselves in a situation where they can't work because of a rating less, because of conditions that are rated less than 100%, they can get that 100% payment level. And that's a really valuable benefit for veterans. And there's no age cap. So a veteran who's over retirement age can still get that. And of course, people over 67 years old are working today.
Right.
And that's a recognition of that. The current administration is looking at eliminating that. I hope they don't, because there's a lot of veterans I know who are in their 70s who still really need the income from working, but they can't.
Right. No, I think that makes sense. And what I see a lot in my Social Security cases is my clients come to me and say, well, I'm 90% disabled or even 100% disabled from the VA. Certainly I get picked up on Social Security disability. Explain why that's not always the case.
Well,
hardly the case.
Fundamentally, they're completely different rule systems, right? So the VA is rating these conditions individually. They're usually, except in the total disability based on individual unemployability situation, they're not evaluating whether this has prevented you from holding a job. A veteran can have a 100% rating and still work full time.
Okay.
Interestingly, I'm curious what your experience is in the Social Security system where you've got a veteran who is 100% rated. Do you have judges who deny those claims on the Social Security side, either because they feel they shouldn't double dip or they look at it and say, well, I don't care what VA's doctors have to say?
More the latter. You know, we have a lot of cases where our clients are 100% disabled on the VA side, that the judges the Social Security judges just say that there's not enough evidence from the Social Security standpoint to establish that they're permanently disabled from the Social Security standpoint, which baffles me. It baffles our client, but you're right. It is two totally different ways of looking at the claim and what impact the disability has on employment. VA doesn't really look at the impact it has on employment as much, where Social Security disability, that's their sole focus, is what impact does it have?
The theory behind VA's rating scheme, back in the 1940s, they came up with these percentages and said, well, this is how much a person is being affected in terms of their employment if they have different conditions. So they have these diagnostic codes where for one condition, you might get a 10%, a 20%, a 50%, and it depends on your symptoms. Interestingly, in the situation you're describing in Social Security, I think a lot of that has to do with the veteran not going to the doctor and getting things documented the way you would hope they do. It's the same problem I was describing earlier, and they might be going to VA doctors.
That's the problem we always see in our Social Security cases.
And they just don't document things well. And you just say, well, listen, why don't you just go spend your own money and go to a doctor outside a few times, and they'll actually document more.
Well, you think that they're documenting because you get like 4,000 pages from the VA, but they all say the same thing.
That's right.
You repeat, and that's all they ever really say.
Well, we're both old enough to remember claim files that were, a foot thick.
That's
now it's
exactly
just how
true.
many gigabytes
That's
the
exactly
PDF
right.
is, right?
That is exactly right. But John, I think there's also something that's called special monthly compensation.
Yes.
What is that in terms of VA?
So there are certain conditions or combinations of conditions that if the veteran has them, they can actually get paid more than 100% money. So let's say a veteran receives a 100% rating for one condition, and they have other conditions that get rated at 60% or 70%. They can actually get a 50% bump up because of those other conditions. So VA has basically recognized that that combination of problems is more severe than the one condition that might be at 100%. There's so many different types of special monthly compensation. I couldn't list them all in the time that we have. Combinations of paralysis in one arm and one leg. A lot of male veterans are actually receiving something called SMCK under subsection K of the regulation for erectile dysfunction. They're prescribed medication. It causes erectile dysfunction. Any type of sexual dysfunction actually is covered under SMCK. Okay. So a female veteran that has a problem with libido because of medication, as an example. But this is all additional money. Some of it's small. SMCK, as an example, is about $160 a month. Some of it very large. So for the veteran that you may have seen who needs their house, revised, they're a quadriplegic or a paraplegic, they're getting additional payments to compensate them for that severe disability. So SMC is a very valuable thing, and anybody who's helping a veteran needs to understand if that might apply.
Sounds very interesting. Is that something that the VA without the attorney may not fully appreciate?
Oh, very often they'll just miss it.
To happen. We do have about 20 minutes left on this episode of FLA Law on the Radio. It's John Tucker sharing his thoughts and his expertise on VA disability claims. Give us a call if you have a question, 727-441-3000. We'll be happy to tackle the question. Mr. Tucker has taken his time out of his busy schedule to be here to answer your question. So I would strongly recommend you capitalize on this opportunity to get your questions asked, especially if you or someone you love is dealing with a VA claim. If you have questions about personal injury or workers' comp or even Social Security disability, give us a call too, and I'll be happy to answer those questions. If you have questions regarding any other areas of law, give us a call. John and I have been doing law for about the same amount of time, so we'll be able to at least, give you some guidance on any area of law. If you talk about the rules of perpetuity or anything like that, John gets those questions because I'm the host.
We're not touching the rule against perpetuity.
That's right.
That's for our real estate lawyer friends.
That's right. That's right. But no, we are here to help you, and so we welcome you to take the opportunity to call in with any questions that you may have. But John, when is the best time for a veteran to hire a lawyer?
Well, I think if a veteran can hire a lawyer to do their application, albeit no charge, that's probably the best. I understand that some people want to try to do things on their own, and that's fair. But if you're denied, if you receive a rating decision that doesn't give you everything you think you should have gotten, that's the time. Don't wait. A veteran has a year to appeal a rating decision.
I was going to ask you that.
But of course, all lawyers have had people come to them with 1 day left on the statute of limitations, right? And it's so much easier to get involved in a claim right after it's decided. I was talking earlier about the types of appeals. At the regional office, you can send in new evidence. That's a supplemental claim, but you can also appeal technical things about the rating decision. We've had people come to us, and we have filed that kind of an appeal called a higher level review, or HLR, literally within a week or two. And we have had people's claims reversed in a matter, as few as 3 days.
Wow.
So when VA makes an obvious error or an error that maybe isn't so obvious, but if they really took a look at it, they'd realize why they were wrong. Having a lawyer address that has a lot of value. And there are some lawyers that appeal a lot of things to the Board of Veterans' Appeals. That can take years. But in our firm, we really like to use these two appeal vehicles at the regional office. And we've gotten a lot of veterans paid very quickly. The knock on lawyers in the VA area is that people think we want to sit on the claim so we can get a bigger fee. I would much rather get a vet paid rapidly, as soon as possible. It's the right thing to do. They're fighting the VA. They're already into it for months. And frankly, most of my clients think that if we get it done fast, we're great.
Right.
So if there's a selfish motive there, I'm happy to have them understand, we really wanted them to get paid fast and we got them paid fast. A lot of times when you hire a lawyer, fast is not what's going to happen. It's better.
Right.
But it's not faster.
No.
But sometimes you can. And so as soon as you get a rating decision that's adverse, that is something that you don't think is right, call a lawyer that does VA disability, and call people that actually work in the area. There's not that many of us, unfortunately, but calling somebody who dabbles in it, it's too complex. It's extremely complex.
Yeah. Now, if they had a rating decision and they don't agree with that rating number and you decide to appeal it, do they receive the benefits from the rating decision that was given during the appeal time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I think that's important to know too. So it's important that if you do dispute the rating decision, that there's really no harm, no foul, because you're not giving up any of your benefits.
Not exactly.
Okay.
VA can take away. So what VA giveth,
Okay.
VA can taketh away.
All right.
So one of the things that we evaluate is whether VA is going to look at the claim favorably. Can we develop the evidence to show that the person really is entitled to a greater rating decision? There are times when people come to us with a rating decision, we look at the medical evidence and we say, you shouldn't have gotten this one.
Not worth the risk.
Don't appeal it because they're likely to take it away. And interestingly, in the time of Doge now, we are seeing a lot more reductions. We're having people call us in the last month more than ever with an appeal that they tried on their own and they got their ratings reduced. And now we're going to have to fight to get those just back to the level where they were. So that's part of the advice that we're going to give a veteran is this, this may not be worth pursuing, or, oh yes, you really need to pursue this. And they're not, you have enough evidence where they're not going to take your 50% away or your 60% or whatever you've got.
Right.
Yeah.
Now you are seeing a lot of things in the news, what do you think about the reductions at the VA? How would that impact the vets?
The secretary has said that they're not going to take personnel out of the departments that are deciding claims. What they've done, so I guess in terms of disability compensation claims, maybe we won't see that initially.
Okay.
I don't know. But what they have already done is canceled contracts. And some of those contracts impact things like suicide prevention and other things like that. So veterans so far have already lost some benefits that are available to them or lost access to certain programs because of some of the cuts that have happened. The number of cuts that they've announced that they want to do is very large. Ultimately, it's going to impact the veterans somehow. We are seeing more people contact us for jobs who work at the VA. Morale is very low at the VA. And there seems to be a belief among some VA employees that maybe they need to weed out some fraud. So maybe that's why we're seeing some of these reductions in greater numbers. I don't know. I think it all is going to have to play out. There's going to be some impact, but what we've only seen so far really applies to programs that have been cut as opposed to delays. A lot of people worry about delays. I'm not seeing cases get slowed down much compared to what they were 6 months ago.
Okay. That's good. I mean, you don't want to, it was really slow many years ago or just a few years ago.
Yes. Before they passed the Appeals Modernization Act, we waited years and years and years.
So you don't want to see it go back to that.
Oh gosh,
That'd be horrible.
Yes.
That'd be horrible. But what advice do you give? And I guess it's not just the veteran, it could be his or her spouse or even a family member. What advice do you share with the family about what do they have to consider when they're deciding whether or not to file for a disability claim or not?
Well, there's no reason not to file. So put differently, file the claim.
Okay.
The worst that happens is VA says, no, denied. But if a veteran had something happen to them in the service that immediately caused any kind of problem or downstream, multiple sclerosis is a good example. They may have had an exposure and within a few years developed multiple sclerosis.
Okay.
There are certain presumptive periods in the VA system that I didn't talk about earlier that if a disease develops in a certain period of time, VA will consider it connected to your service.
Oh, okay.
Some, that's your entire life. Anyone who served in the service who develops ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, VA will presume that's because of their military service. Parkinson's disease is another one that has a presumptive period. You may have heard about Camp Lejeune. Well, there are 8 cancers that are presumed connected to the water at Camp Lejeune if you were there during a certain period of time. I bring this up because a lot of veterans don't know, and they think, well, I don't know that that's related. File the claim.
Right.
You may not know about something in the law that actually allows you to get paid without even needing a doctor's opinion that says it's related, because the VA has done enough studies to figure out, oh yes, Agent Orange causes prostate cancer. People don't get prostate cancer in their 20s and 30s. They get it in their 60s, right? So we have all these guys who went to Vietnam. They later developed this and if they didn't know, well, they would have never gotten the benefit. So file the claim for everything that you think might be related to your service. And then if it's denied, you can make a decision after you get some advice about whether it's a good idea to pursue the benefits. But there's a lot that comes with VA benefits that isn't just a payment from the VA. A veteran in Florida that is found to be permanently and totally disabled at 100%, they don't pay property taxes.
Oh,
They get free car tags. I mean, they're saving a lot of money.
right.
And justifiably so. They gave their life, their body,
Right.
they potentially their life for our country.
Right. That's good. What other type of benefits? I didn't understand. I didn't appreciate that. They had other benefits. It's not, and I guess it's not just the monetary either. It's the sense of, I fought and I'm being not compensated, but I'm being thanked for the
That's
service that I
recognition.
did. Recognition. Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody says that did happen to you. I have to say, in all the cases I've ever handled, the one thing I see over and over, vets who suffer from PTSD, the VA rater who says, you don't have PTSD. The VA compensation and pension examiner who says, you don't have PTSD, when their treating psychologist says they do. For somebody to say, that didn't happen to you, you really don't have that problem after they've been in combat or seen something horrible happen when they were in the service.
Right.
Or military sexual trauma is a very big problem. And it's not just male on female sexual trauma, it's also male on male sexual assault.
Right.
For somebody to say that didn't happen, to live with that the rest of your life, that somebody has told you you're a liar, that has, indelible impact on people.
Right. I could imagine. And how about in your practice? I've seen this a lot in our practice, especially Social Security disability. The applicant may diminish the impact their disability has on themselves, but the spouse or the family member really sees it. Do you see that in your VA claim?
Oh, yes. And we very often ask spouses and family members to write a statement. We tend to have to guide them to the topic. We don't want them just writing about
Right.
anything, but we try to get them to talk about the things that VA cares about. And we often tell people part of our job is to help you talk VA. We want VA to listen to
VA
you.
math and VA English.
That's right. VA English. I like that. I'm going to start using that. But yes, family members see things and they don't want to weigh somebody down. So they don't talk to them about it.
Right. And I think that's so important because, the family members don't want to diminish the applicant's sense of being, but also want to help them. And so I think it's important that the family member feel comfortable enough to talk to the attorney about, hey, he's not telling you this or she's not telling you that, but this is what I see.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
sets it forth out.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, we've been talking about VA disability almost for 53 minutes, but I also want to at least touch base on the ERISA disability as well. Can you explain to our listeners the difference between a VA disability and even a Social Security disability and an ERISA disability?
So the vast majority of people who work for an employer who have insurance through work, and this is any kind of insurance you have, we just happen to focus on disability, it's covered by a federal law called the Employee Retirement Income Security Act. ERISA is the acronym, ERISA. And ERISA applies to those benefits, and it's different than state insurance law. So if you went down the street and bought a disability insurance policy from your local insurance broker, it's probably going to be very expensive, but you've got different protections. You used to have more before Florida had some tort reform last year, but
yes.
Under ERISA, you don't have as many protections, but the insurance is much cheaper typically. Sometimes it's even provided by an employer. And there's processes that you have to go through if you don't agree with a benefit denial. So if you apply and the insurance company that handles the plan says, oh, we don't think you're disabled, well, you can file an appeal. In fact, you have to file an appeal before you go to court. Most of these group plans have 2 years where they'll pay a person based on whether they can do their own occupation. And after that, they're looking at whether they can do any occupation. And they also have things like offsets for Social Security disability. So if you help somebody get Social Security disability, that's coming off the top of their long-term disability insurance. That's part of how they keep these group policies cheap. Okay. So it's kind of a gap filler, and it gets you up to 60% usually of what you were making before. The challenge that people don't understand is when you have to go to court in these cases, you don't get a trial with new evidence and witnesses, and the judge is not going to hear anything new about your disability other than the paper that was submitted during your claim. So if somebody gets denied in an ERISA case, they need to find an ERISA lawyer to do the appeal, because that appeal has to have expert reports. It's got to have vocational information, witness statements, information from doctors that explain why somebody's disabled. And you have to put the insurance company's doctors in a box and get them, in a position where you can explain to a judge down the road if they don't want to change their mind and say, oh, we were wrong. Sorry, you're disabled. You go to the judge, you have to be able to explain those people were not reasonable, judge. Here's why.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so it is totally different, but I've heard that, ERISA people that file their appeal on their own can really hurt their case because the appeal was filed without the attorney, and they're bound to not prevail that way.
They don't know what to send in. Yeah. I mean, that's really the biggest problem.
Yeah. We do look like we did have a question on Facebook.
Okay.
M says, can you explain why attending your C&P exams is so important to your claim?
Well, first, if you don't go to your C&P exam, you're almost undoubtedly going to get denied. So
sounds like it'd be very important.
VA is going to say, you don't go to that. We don't think you have a problem. Now, if you've seen a doctor on your own and you have a good report to explain why something's connected to your service, that C&P exam may be superfluous. It's possible it should not have been ordered at all to begin with. That's a tactical decision about whether to go to that or not. It's usually a mistake not to go, because if you've got good medical records, if that C&P examiner gives you a bad opinion, you can usually attack that pretty easily and explain they didn't consider all the records, all the evidence, whatever the case is. But you're almost undoubtedly going to get denied if you don't go to the C&P exam.
I think the risk doesn't outweigh the reward of not attending. Yeah. So I think it's very important.
Right. You have a bigger problem if you're not treating with a doctor. Just relying on the C&P examiner to say, oh, yeah, you do have a problem. That's not going to go very well.
Yeah. Well, John, I really appreciate you taking the time to educate me and as well as our listeners. Thank you for, taking an hour out of your time. I know you're a busy man. Why don't you tell our listeners where your office is and how they can reach you when you're not here on FLA Law on the radio?
Well, I appreciate you having me. Thank you very much. Tucker Disability is based in St. Petersburg, but we have a national practice. We represent veterans and people in ERISA cases all over the United States, and we actually have employees in 6 different states now. TuckerDisability.com is the best way to get in touch with us. There's an online chat there, and you can connect with us that way, or you can call us at 727-572-5000.
And your website has all your testimonials that sound really great too. So I encourage anybody to go to TuckerDisability.com to get more information about John. We appreciate you. Wraps up the show for this week. We appreciate you listening. And as I always like to end the show, I encourage you to drive safely and watch out for those who don't. Take care. We'll see you next week.